Tonight, we're going to continue our conversation through the book of Hebrews. We've called this series Supreme, which the whole tagline is, Jesus is over all things. Why? Because Jesus is God. And the next several weeks are going to be really practical. I'm personally excited to teach through the next several weeks because they're going to really put rubber to road. I mean, we're going to start learning some different things. And I pray that you've been learning along the way as you've been journaling through Hebrews perhaps, or maybe meeting in groups or learning in other environments. But my hope, my prayer is that as we start to kind of really dig in and put some teeth to this thing over the next several weeks, that it helps you take real tangible steps in your journey with Jesus. That's the goal. That's the hope. And that's what we've been praying for. And so these next several weeks are going to be that. And this week, tonight, we're going to be looking at something that it's going to sound super big, but it's going to be very basic in the way we approach it, but it's going to be honest in the way we approach it. And it's going to do something, the author here in Hebrews, we're in chapter 12. If you have your phone, it's on the screen, or your Bible with you. The author here in chapter 12, he's going to do something for us that's very unique. And it happens every now and then in Scripture, but it's going to feel almost like a movie, where you watch a movie and they set the scene and then immediately it goes, now 20 years earlier, and you get a flashback. It's kind of be one of those conversations, because tonight, what we're going to talk about, this conversation that I want everybody to lean into and glean from, is going to be all about how do we grow in our faith? How do we grow in our faith? This is a conversation that if we're being just super candid, it's so wide, it's so basic, it's so broad that it almost just seems expected when you walk into the doors of a church. Well, of course, we're going to talk about our faith. Isn't that what we always do? But let's get real with one another. Oftentimes, we see conversations about growing in our faith as either too basic or too big to approach. Does that make sense? I mean, think about it. When somebody asks you how you grow in your faith, a lot of times you have to sit there and ask, I don't really know. It's kind of like when somebody asks you to explain gravity. You're like, I don't know. It's just like the thing that happens when you jump and then you fall down. You're like, I don't really know how to explain it. Like faith, it kind of is like that. I mean, you ask somebody, hey, how do you grow in your faith? I don't know. Try harder. Most of the time, that's what people, right? Like they'll say that to you, because sometimes we say some stupid things as Christians to people. You just need to try harder in your faith. What does that mean? Did I grow? Did I grow? Did you try it again? No, grunt harder. Did I grow? Man, I don't know, you look the same, just weirder. Like we kind of treat it, right? Like we kind of have that approach. It's so difficult for us to kind of articulate and maybe even understand on a personal level how to grow in our faith. Do you know why? Because we approach the topic of growing in our faith like a kid trying to clean up his bedroom. Here's what I mean. Maybe when you were a kid, did you ever have this experience where your parents came in and they said, it's time for you to clean your room, and you hadn't cleaned your room in about a year and a half. And you knew, like your clothes, they made mountains. Like the ones on bottom, you wore 2 grades ago, right? Like as a kid, you were like, dude, I grew out of that. Like I just figured my little sister had come in and taken that at some point. Like you've got Doritos wrappers everywhere. I mean, it looks like you have a shrine to every just fast food wrapper over in the corner. Like it's just, your room is just, it smells, you can't even put a finger on what the smell is. It smells like a wild animal got lost in a Taco Bell for about a day or two. Like your room it's just crazy. Like and your parents say, it's time for you to clean your room. And you go in and you kind of just open the door and you're like, because you've gotten used to it at this point. You're like, I'm used to the smell. I don't think it smells. Yeah, because you spent a year and you have your path, right? You kind of play hopscotch to get to your bed, and then you can sleep and you're like, I'm fine. It's cool, right? I can still reach my PlayStation. I'm fine, right? I mean, you kind of had that like as a kid, and you open your door and you're like, oh goodness. And sometimes we treat growing in our faith like we're a kid trying to clean up his bedroom. We just don't really know where to start, and it seems so big that we're just not sure exactly what to do. And so this week, we're going to look at exactly what to do, but we're going to look at it in a way that'll hopefully benefit everybody and help us understand how much more we can relate to the original audience of this scripture than we maybe think we could. So if you would, go with me to Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Here it is. It's on the screen. Pull it up on your phone. Pull out your Bible. Pull out your journal. Whatever you have. Check out what the author says. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Now here's what we got to do, right? Okay, let's bring back everybody's high school English class scars, right? And kind of jar everybody for a minute, right? And we got to look. The first word that we get to in this passage is therefore. And here's what your high school English teacher told you, right? Anytime you studied literature, maybe you went into college and you did it too, and now you're having all flashbacks. Everybody's like, oh, I can't. Please stop talking about English, right? What do we do when we see a therefore? You got to look at why the therefore is therefore. And so the best way we do that is in order to understand what the therefore is there for, we got to go back. Because the therefore is there for a reason, and that reason typically precedes the words that have just been read. Do you understand what I'm saying? Which basically is my way of saying, let's rewind to what the author just said, so we understand why he just said what he just said. Because what he just said was, if you want to grow in your faith, we need to look to Jesus. That's what he said. What did he say? Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith. Do you know what that word means, founder, in its original language? So if you want to get a little dorky with me for a second, break out the old seminary degree here vicariously. It means in its original language, which was Greek, it means pathfinder. It says Jesus is the founder and perfecter of our faith. That word founder is what we would get our word pathfinder. That's what it means, which meant Jesus made the way. Almost like the Bible, lines up in this, because Jesus himself calls himself what? The way. See, we forget sometimes the Bible is incredible, right? I mean, you have 40-some different authors written over about 1,500 years, and it all points to the same thing and lines up even in different words like this. Some of us, we probably came in tonight and we didn't know that. That's what he calls Jesus, the pathfinder, the way, the one who made the way for our faith. So he's telling them, I want you to look to Jesus, but understand, I'm going to give you something to kind of use as a backdrop so that you can reference and be encouraged and be propelled by, because now you get to look at Jesus. And what he's going to do is he's going to lay out in the previous chapter, chapter 11, he's going to lay out what I would call the Hall of Fame when it comes to Bible characters, right? People in the Old Testament of your Bible who were basically just on the Mount Rushmore of faith, right? It's this Hall of Fame of faith. And he's going to lay out some people here, and he's going to lay out what he did and what each of them did, what each man and each woman did as far as applying their faith, growing in their faith, exercising their faith, demonstrating their faith, and how God used it. And the reason he's laying that out is he's saying, listen, I want to give you this kind of truth to just launch into as you grow into your faith. Every one of these people in the Hall of Fame, as we call it, every one of them believed in God and had hope in the Jesus who would come. But now you have hope in the Jesus who has come. He's saying, listen, I want you to understand the backdrop of these people who put their life's effort into this faith in God based on a hope that Jesus would come. And he's saying, but now you know Jesus did come. And he is the way, the pathfinder. But I want you to look at what these people did, because he's trying to encourage them to, quote, run the race with endurance. And so he's taken them back previously to the Hall of Fame. When I was in high school, we had a hallway in our school that we called the Hall of Fame hallway. And basically, it was where athletes in the school who had become maybe all-conference athletes or all-state athletes, basically student athletes who became famous in the area for achieving certain levels of success in their sport. And I'm from Virginia, where if you've seen movies, you know in Virginia, high school football is kind of like a way of life in certain parts of the state. And so it's a very big deal. So they kind of erected this like shrine of a wall. I mean, everybody had a special photo. It was encased. It had all their accolades listed and different quotes and everything. And it was just this hallway that just went on and went on. At some point, it had to turn because they kept adding them over the years. And of course, the joke was, look at all the different hairstyles over the decades, right? And you kind of see that. And we would have to run that hallway. My coach would make us run that hallway. And the reason he would do that is we'd have to run that hallway, run up the stairs, back down the stairs, and run by the hallway. And it was these conditioning drills that we would have to do. And the reason he would make us run by the Hall of Fame hallway every week when we would be doing conditioning is he wanted us to see the value of hard work. That's what he wanted to see. Because we would ask, Coach, why do we have to run by this hallway? Why do they have this hallway up? Like, why do I care what this person did 15 years ago? I'm focused on my season. And he would say, the reason I want you to see is not so you can celebrate their accolades, but so that you can be reminded of the efforts that it took to get there. Because every one of those accolades is attached to hard work that can't be seen. What can be seen is the picture and what happened and what they achieved, the face, the crazy hairdo. What can be seen is all of that. But what can't be seen is the hours in the gym, the hours on the track, the hours in the pool, the hours on the field, the hours in the court. What can't be seen is the training that is underneath the photo. And I want you to be reminded as you run and you put in that work is for a reason. He wanted to remind us of that. Does that make sense? That's what we would do. So when we would be sweating like crazy running through that hallway, we'd look and be like, it's worth it. It's worth it. I want a cheesy photo of myself on that wall one day. So it's worth it. It's worth it. Every time we did push-ups and sit-ups and ran by that hall, we just said it every time. I want to get on the wall. 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 I mean, it's nuts. It's nuts, but it drilled in us the value of effort and how that effort produces results that last. Does that make sense? That's what it did for us. And he kind of lays that out in chapter 11, because what he's basically saying is, I want you to see from this list of people, from this litany of people in the Old Testament, from this litany of people I'm going to lay out in Hebrews 11, right before the therefore, I want you to see what happens when faithful people meet a faithful God. God will do what only God can do. And so he lays out for them, even starting at the beginning in creation, he says, look, if you want to have faith in God, it's going to have to start with this trust that God made all things. It's going to have to start foundationally here, that God is the creator of all things. And then he kind of goes in to listing some people. He lists Abel, right? One of the very first human beings to walk the earth, right? After Adam and Eve. And he says, look, Abel brought his best to God. Abel brought sacrifices to God. This whole, interaction between God and humanity was still new, and Abel brought his best. Abel showed us what it meant to worship by faith. There was a man named Enoch who was known for preaching for God. He was known for telling everybody he could about God, and known especially for having a relationship with God. He's kind of laying this out. He's saying, look, Abel showed you what it was like to worship by faith. Enoch showed you what it was like to walk by faith. He points at Noah. Everybody knows Noah, right? Noah was the captain of probably the most famous boat in the history of humanity, right? Noah, build a boat, Noah. Everybody just completely dogged on Noah. He's telling them God's going to do this, God's going to do this. Listen, a lot of rain coming. I built this big old boat. y'all should probably get in it, right? They didn't. His family did. But fortunately for all of our zoos here in 21st century culture, he got some animals on the boat. Everybody knew Noah. Noah knew what it was like when God said, I want you to get to work. He got to work. He showed us what it meant to work in our faith. Everybody would have known Noah. Everybody would have known Noah. He even goes back even more. He says, look at Abraham. Abraham was just this absolute Mount Rushmore figure of faith. But he said, I want you to understand about Abraham. Abraham learned over time to submit to God's way. See, Abraham would trust God here, then trust God here, then trust God here. And at one point, God told Abraham to take his son up a hill and sacrifice his son. And he said, if that's what you would have, but God used it to intervene to show him what was to come. That God would be sending a substitution, a payment. God would be making a way. See, he was showing Abraham that. And the author here wants to remind the readers, that is Jesus. Jesus is the way. Jesus made the way. Jesus is the pathfinder. So he starts laying out Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. Everybody knows Joseph. Joseph, he had some dreams. He decided to share those dreams. His brothers were not jiving with his dreams. They beat him up. They threw him in a pit. They sold him into slavery. Man, that kind of worked out for him. He got promoted. And then, right, Real Housewife Potiphar's wife just came up on him and said, hey, I like Hebrew boys and I cannot lie. And he just kind of, he said, yeah, I don't think so, right? He tried to give her he tried to just kind of, no. She spreads lies about him and gets thrown in prison. But then God does what only God can do and raises him out to literally rescue a people. And he shows somebody like Joseph, look at that kind of faith when somebody lies about you, when you're thrown in the pit, when things get real, when you feel destitute, when you feel alone. How do you have faith, Joseph? He continues to list out Joseph. Moses, the people who crossed the Red Sea with Moses. Again, God making a way. He says, by faith, the walls of Jericho came down, right? People just broke out their instruments, took a walk, started playing. Boom, 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 boom. Rahab, a prostitute. Some of you are like, you can't talk about prostitutes in church. It's right there. It's right there. Some of you are thinking, I don't know that I can grow in my faith. He's talking about a hooker. Right there. Rahab, a prostitute, she showed hospitality to some men of God who others would not show. Some of you are thinking, I don't know that I have what it takes to grow in my faith. Well, I just shared with you people who got laughed at, discarded, sold into slavery, lied about, prostitutes. I mean, a litany of broken people who went through it, but who learned how to grow in their faith. That's what the author is doing here. He's saying, listen. Here's this person, Gideon, David, Samuel. I mean, he just keeps going and going and going. These people in the Hall of Fame, these people in chapter 11 who he lists, right? The therefore. What is it there for? He's pointing them back there for this express purpose. He wants them to know when faithful people meet a faithful God, God does what only God can do. And so he has to set this foundation for them so that they understand and so that we, even now, thousands of years later, understand that the basis for our conversation is a knowledge, is a trust, is a belief that faith is built with God up close and over time. What does he say? I want you to run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus. Looking to Jesus. What? The pathfinder, the way maker, the founder and perfecter of our faith. Looking to Jesus. I'm going to give you the backdrop of the Hall of Fame. I'm going to let you see how these people dealt with what they dealt with and still grew in their faith and how they applied what they believed about God. They lived as though God is who he says he is. They put feet to their faith, and God did what only God can do. And so I want you to understand that is what's behind you. That is who's gone before you. You need to see the evidence. The proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the people. The proof is in the examples set before you. But now, It's look to Jesus because Jesus was there. Jesus is the pathfinder for your faith. So you want to know how to grow in your faith? Start to look for Jesus. But if we're being real, a lot of times the conversations that I have with people, a lot of times we're not even sure what faith is. We're not really sure how to articulate that. When you ask somebody, hey, what's faith? Maybe they quote some meme they saw on Instagram, and you're kind of looking at them like, oh, okay, that makes sense. You're like, where'd you get that? I can't tell you. And you're like, oh, sure, I saw that too. I Googled images too, right? Like that's kind of, we don't really know because faith is, it's kind of a little bit funky for us to understand in a way. Because it's such a small word with a big definition, right? But we all understand what faith is, kind of at its core, at its function, on a very basic level, and we do this kind of subconsciously. For example, every single one of you has faith that the thing you're sitting on is going to keep you up sitting on it. You have exercised faith, whether you know it or not. You could be Jesus Jr. or running with the devil. I don't know where you would plot yourself on your journey with Jesus, your faith journey, but I'm going to tell you right now, everybody in the room is a person of faith. Why? Because you're sitting on something, and you have faith that something's going to keep you right there. That it's going to keep you. See, we understand kind of the basis of faith. We understand what it is. So when he says, look, we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, he's saying, look, we're not alone. We're not alone. People did this. Oh, but God, I'm struggling with this. But God, I'm worried about this. But God, I'm just unsure about this. Okay. But look, Noah, boat. People made fun of him. People discarded him. Joseph, my goodness. Joseph's song was a country song before country songs were country songs. I mean, Joseph, my goodness, man. Joseph could have been a show from late 90s CW. I mean, his life was crazy. And look at the faith that he had. Rahab, she was a prostitute. I mean, look at all these people. Moses' life is just one insane story after another. And you're thinking, okay. I've got this cloud of witnesses. Okay. They did it. I need to grow. They did it. Okay, so what do I do now? Now you look to Jesus. But what is faith? What is that? Like, what do we do when he says, I want you to run with endurance the race that is set, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, which means that our faith has to be rooted in the truth of Jesus. Because if Jesus is the pathfinder for our faith, we have to look to Jesus to understand what faith is. Because faith is when we live as Jesus is who he says he is. Does that make sense? I mean, that's essentially what he's saying. Faith is living on the outside the hope that's on the inside. It's where our belief in God collides with our hope in Jesus, which produces a life rooted in the purpose of the gospel, a life that reflects the character and priorities of God. Do you understand that? That's what faith is. Faith is putting feet to what you believe about God. Faith is trusting that God is who he says he is and Jesus is God's way. That is essentially what faith is, because that's what all of these people in the Hall of Fame did. They all did this. They all believed God for who he was, and they all had hope that there was an eligible redeemer for humanity yet to come, and so they were trusting God. And look what God did. Noah, that boat thing really worked out. I mean, it worked out so much, Hallmark makes little precious moments, statues of them that you can buy. Whew. Noah's famous. I mean, they make plushies. Noah has a stuffed doll. Noah. Isn't that nuts? They made a VeggieTales about that man. It kind of worked out for, I mean, obviously I'm being silly, but you understand what I'm saying, right? They all knew that they had to put belief in God, and they lived it out. And God did what only God can do. Look at Joseph. Look at David. Look at Moses. God making ways when nobody knew there was a way. Faith really does something to us. And again, we all understand this on a base level, but we don't simplify it to lace up our shoes with it in life as often as we should. We don't do that because, again, we're standing in the doorway looking at the mountain of clothes, being told to clean up our room, and we're not even sure where to start. But we all understand, at least subconsciously, we all understand on some type of intrinsic level, like we get that faith moves people. Again, I just said everybody in this room is a person of faith. It moved you to do something. It prompted you to do something. I'm thirsty, so I have faith that water is going to quench my thirst, right? Like I believe this, so I'm going to put action to this. Faith is this powerful force that we sometimes just kind of treat in church world as this lofty thing that I need to tell you, you need to have great faith that God is going to part the seas in your life. And if you don't have that kind of faith, you don't have any kind of faith. And we kind of give it to people like this, that faith is this out there thing that we have to jump and try to get to. Faith is this, that's kind of how we kind of treat faith, but faith is up close, but it's powerful. When you believe that God is who he says he is, when you trust that Jesus is God's way, you cannot help but be moved by that. Do you understand? Look at the stories in the Old Testament with Noah, Moses, Abraham, David. My goodness, these people who just did incredible things for God. Why? Why do we see that? Do you know why? Because it was faithful person meets faithful God. And God did what only God can do, because faith is powerful. Faith is powerful. It sees what can't be seen. It hears what can't be heard. It touches the intangible. It achieves the impossible. But for many of us, faith is just words, all talk and no walk. But true faith in God is action-oriented. Faith moves us. Are you tracking with that? But let's be real. We sit there and say, yes, faith should move me, but I got this going on, but this has happened to me. I have these questions. I have these fears. I'm confused by this. Yeah, faith should move me to apply action. I should love people. I should be a light to people. I should forgive people. I should be gracious to people. I should serve people. But do you know people, Scott? Have you met people? People are broken. People are messed up. This world is upside down. You can't trust anybody. You don't know what's going on. It's so dark. It's so confusing. I'm so afraid. I'm so angry. So if faith is supposed to move me, how do I get moved through the difficulty? Of course, everybody feels like that. You don't think they felt like that? Can you imagine being Joseph? Can you imagine being Joseph? Sold by his own flesh and blood into slavery, working so hard, being faithful to God and getting promoted, only to be sabotaged again and lied about and thrown in the darkest of prisons. To then even still be faithful to God in spite of everything that would happen to him. Noah, who put himself out there. You can't hide a big boat like that. It's not like you can go to Lowe's and buy a tarp and just cover it up and be like, what you got under there, Noah? It's just firewood. It's no big deal. That's a lot of firewood, man. How big is this fire, right? How many s'mores are you making, Noah? Like, that's a big, you can't hide that. They made fun of Noah so hard. Noah got completely ostracized from society. And they said, Noah, you're weird. We don't want anything to do with you. They bumped him out. They treated him as a pariah. Moses had to deal with Pharaoh and plagues and wandering in the wilderness, snakes biting people, crazy food coming. There was hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. The Hall of Fame is filled with hurdles, much like it is for us when we want to grow in our faith. Which is why he says, I want you to lay aside every weight. Work to ditch the sin that wants to cling so tightly to you. How valuable must the soul of a person be if the devil fights God over it? So when you want to grow in your faith, you need to understand there will be hurdles. We understand this. We very, very, very much understand this. Because life gets so real and it gets so hard. We take a step in our faith, life knocks us 2 steps back. We take another step in our faith, life knocks us 3 steps back. And before you know it, our legs get tired and we wonder, I don't know that I can run this race with endurance. I don't know what it takes to build endurance in this race. I'm just not sure that I have what it takes to lay aside every weight, to not have the sin clinging so closely to me. That's why he says, look, you need to look to Jesus, look to Jesus, look to Jesus. Do you know why? Because our faith does not grow overnight. He says, look to Jesus. Perpetually fixate on Jesus. Focus on Jesus. Not glance once, check the box, and your faith is full. He says, no. You got to look to Jesus. Because many of us struggle with this. Our faith is full of words that we walk back when life gets real. When we see the brokenness of people, the selfishness in the mirror, and the fears that bubble up when confusion creates chaos in our lives. So we have to work on our faith, 1 step at a time, because our faith grows when we exercise it. That's how faith grows. You want to move in God's direction? You want faith to move you? You've got to work on that step by step. Looking to Jesus. Do you know what that word run means? The race with endurance. Do you know what that means in its original language? First of all, he's setting that very explicitly. He's very upfront about what that means. He's implying this is a marathon. This is a long journey. It's not a check the box and then go get your Jamba Juice and go home. Right? It's not the Santa run. You put your Santa suit on, you run a mile, you take some photos, you put it on Instagram, and you're done. No. You better get used to those shoes because you're going to be in them for a long time. It is a long journey. That word race, run the race that is set before us, that word race is where, from its original language, that's where you and I get our word agony. You're like, what, for real? Yes. It's where we get our word agony. Do you know what he's saying? He's just laying it out there. He's pulling no punches. He's saying, get ready. This one's going to hurt. Life is real, but that faith in Jesus is rooting us in a greater purpose. It's rooting us in hope. It's rooting us in understanding that we can find peace in a world full of chaos. It's understanding that we have purpose in a world that doesn't seem to know which way is up and which way is down. It's that rooting. He's saying, look, this is going to be a journey. He says, run with endurance. That, even in its original language, do you know what it actually means? If you were to pull that out of the text, if you were to go back, if you knew Greek, you pull it out, you dust it off, it equals, you type it in, the little, Greek definition thing, right? You get all serious, like you get all into it, right? Do you know what that word means, endurance? It means a steady determination set before you. A steady determination. See, races aren't won at the starting line. You're just starting. A race is won 1 step at a time. That's how we grow in our faith. That is how we grow in our faith. Because our faith is simply this. Faith is living like God is who he says he is. It is trusting in Jesus enough that it moves us in his direction. It's where we build out our lives with the bricks that are the teachings of Jesus, so that we put into motion what we believe about God and the hope we have in Jesus. That's what faith is. 1 step at a time. So if you came in tonight and you said, okay, how do I grow in faith? If we were all in that boat before, listen, first of all, take a breath and get ready. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And if you want to run that race with endurance, you're going to have to do a few things. 1, you're going to have to look to Jesus. Look to Jesus. And I'm going to say something that's going to sound like a typical pastor thing, but it is just simple. It's basic, but basic is helpful. You cannot look to Jesus and ignore his word. Oh, that got in somebody's face. Because in 21st century American Christian culture, it's real popular to be a fan of Jesus, But a lot of people are afraid to follow Jesus because when you follow Jesus, that's up close and over time. And you cannot look to Jesus and ignore his word. It just does not happen that way. So if you want to look to Jesus, you need to look at the one who is the way. Are you rooted? Second, you got to learn from Jesus. You got to look to Jesus. You got to learn from Jesus. Do you know how you learn someone in a relationship? You spend time with them. You spend time with them. I tell people this all the time when people ask me, hey, I need some advice about being a dad. I need some advice about being a parent. I need some of this. I tell them, I said, you know how a kid spells love? Kids spell the word love T-I-M-E. My kids know I love them because I spend time with them. I know my wife because I've invested time in a relationship with her. I ask her questions. We spend time together so we can share values. You want to learn from Jesus? You need to spend time with Jesus, pursuing a relationship with God and communing with God's people, his church. You want to learn from Jesus? You pursue that relationship. You need to look to Jesus, knowing that he is the founder of your faith. You need to learn from Jesus by pursuing that relationship with him. And then you need to live like Jesus is who he says he is. But that's not all done at one time. That is done, what does it say? Lay aside every weight and sin that clings and get ready to run that race with endurance. Settle in to the steady determination that you will grow in your faith the more you exercise your faith. So if you want to grow in your faith in Jesus, it starts with a step. So what step will you take? How will you look to Jesus? How will you continue to pursue Jesus and learn from Jesus? And what steps will you take by living like Jesus is who he says he is? Because our faith in God is built by relationship with Jesus up close and over time.